Hey guys, welcome back to Seas Today Sailing. We're doing kind of a different video style here today.
We actually took our boat, so our new boat, newish boat, well, new to us boat, out onto Puget Sound over Labor Day weekend 2020, and we thought we would talk through some of the issues we had. Now, on screen, what you're seeing are some of our just clips from going into
Lake Bay.
Lake Bay, and where we stayed the second night. Lots of harbor seals. I keep wanting to say some sea otters, but lots of harbor seals come and greet us, check us out as we go by.
And here we are in the late evening on day 2, coming into Lake Bay. And it's a nice little resort tucked away in the south end of Puget Sound, past Tacoma Narrows and Gig Harbor, on the west side of Fox Island.
And this clip, when we started it, we didn't realize just how far out we were from the actual marina, but we wanted to show you just like all of the boats that were here anchored for the night. It's a gorgeous little area. Unfortunately, we had a dinghy malfunction and were unable to anchor out for this instance.
By malfunction, she means that our dinghy sprung a big leak on one of the main seams that is not repairable.
So we're going to have to replace that here before we go out again. And it was, and since we needed to tie off to a dock so we could get on land briefly, we decided to just get one of the spots up at the marina for the night.
Fortunately, they still had enough room for a boat as large as ours.
Yes, most of course, all the big boats were out anchored. And this marina, even though it's a cute little place, they do not, it is a dock space only. There is no, you can tie to it, but there's no electricity or anything. So we got to experiment with just how much or how little stuff we have ready for being off-grid here in the near future. We have made note of the numerous number of projects we have actually for living aboard full-time.
Well, fortunately, our boat is set up at least marginally for off-grid living. We have a propane stove. We have a diesel cabin heater. We also have 2 oil gimbaled lanterns in the main salon area, which makes off-grid living a little nicer when you don't have power to hook up to or enough power to sustain running everything that you want to run.
But there are still some things like expanding the solar and whatnot because there was no electricity and our 2-year-old didn't get to play his iPad much longer than he wanted to. I say his iPad, his Kindle. Yeah.
Yeah, Mama's iPad, kiddo's Kindle.
Yeah. And so, yeah, this was us coming in. We did get out and were able to walk for around a bit afterwards. The forested area over across from the marina, that is actually a state park.
And there's our diesel heater. I tried to get it started, but unfortunately there's something wrong with the fuel flow and it just doesn't want to keep running. And
this is the next morning.
Beautiful little marina, as you can see. I took this video pretty much as soon as I woke up, and just a nice, quiet, lovely morning with a great view. And we got off the boat a little while later. We went out for a walk just to stretch our legs and check out the area now that we had daylight. And we found this nice little plaque with historical information about Lake Bay, how it got named, and some of the history of the area, which I thought was cool, so I thought I'd share it with everybody.
And then we set off for our next destination. We were heading back up to the beach.
You can see Mount Rainier there in the distance behind all that haze.
Here we're approaching the Tacoma Narrows Bridge. Now, something about the haze around Mount Rainier, one of the things that we hadn't realized was just how bad the wildfires were here in Washington. And that haze, at first, I thought it was just smog or something, but it's not. It's not something we commonly see because we can see Mount Rainier not too far from our house.
Well, we're from the Midwest. We're used to dealing with smog. We're not so used to dealing with wildfires.
And it turns out that haze was actually more the smoke from the wildfires that are going down around Bonnie Lake and whatnot.
Now, we're still going under the Tacoma Narrows Bridge here, and coming in the day before we were coming through this area, I registered at 10.4 knots as my speed over ground on the boat. Coming back through the next morning, we were doing about 6.5 knots through this area, so we're fighting a bit of a current on our way out.
And up until this point, we had really, really great weather. The winds were between 5 and 10 knots. It wasn't too bad. It was enough that we could go out and test our sails and try to figure out how, like, just everything that we do, the processes and mechanisms that we need to use for sailing. What we didn't expect was the next day, what was going on. So overnight, there were some big winds that started coming in. And you'll see, so this was still heading up to the radio tower beach. And we started coming into problems so this evening, but then the next day was really where we had the biggest issues.
We ended up losing one spreader entirely. The lower two spreaders cracked badly, and we went through 2 belts on our motor. We ended up having no spares left, and we ended up having to get towed back to our home port. And we would highly recommend anybody out on the water get some kind of towing insurance for the future. And here we are getting towed. The tow company managed to get us into our port quite nicely.
Even though we were encountering gusts up over
44 knots was the top speed that I recorded. So let's recap what we've learned from our most recent sailing adventure. And I use adventure loosely here.
So, first and foremost, we definitely were not prepared to take the boat out for the weekend. I mean, we've been spending more and more time on this boat. However, we had not been taking it out much for overnights. We've done just mostly day trips up until that point. And by not prepared, we did not know how to use our system. We recommend people who are getting new boats learn your systems before going out. Not only learn your systems, but also understand what it is you need to have those systems work. We did not have everything we needed, so something like the heater at night, we did not have the starter that we needed for the heater to run because we hadn't actually tried to start up the heater ahead of time. We highly recommend tow insurance. It would have saved us a lot of money.
When we lost the spreaders on our mast and we went through all the belts on our motor, we ended up having to get towed back at 5 hours of towing time, and it ended up costing us about $1,600. If we had paid for tow insurance ahead of time, we would have only spent about $175 with who we ultimately went through for tow insurance.
Yep. So make sure when you are going out, your radio works and is reliable.
Our boat only came with a handheld radio. It doesn't have very much range and doesn't really work that well for emergency communications. I am in the process of installing a new marine radio in the boat with a proper antenna, so we'll have our communications working.
When we were stranded, we tried to ring up emergency line on the radio, and we were unable to get through to anybody. And it was thankfully when we were where we had been stranded was close enough to the land that we were able to get cell signals and able to call. Otherwise, we would have been in a very, very bad position.
Um,
And then, no, right, dinghy. So,
oh yes. We found out that the dinghy that came with our boat had a bad seam in it, and no matter what we did to try to patch the seam, it just would not hold air, and the separation in the seam just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So we found out the hard way that we had no working dinghy for our boat.
and this was a problem because we could not actually get off the boat when we were stranded at anchor, a good 20 to 40 feet off the shoreline, because at that point in time the waters were measuring about 52 degrees Fahrenheit, which would have caused some issues for us trying to get to shore. And we are definitely going to, for future reference, we are definitely going to make sure we have some additional form of backup in the event that we cannot get that our dinghy fails us in the future.
Now, another problem that we ran into is when we were forced to anchor out. The anchors that we have on board, they are undersized for this type of boat and the wrong style for the type of sea bottom that we were anchoring on. So we are going to be changing those out as soon as we can, and we are going to be getting a longer anchor chain. Our anchor line is only about 100 feet, and that's 50 feet of chain with 50 feet of rope attached. Not nearly enough for most anchoring situations.
And so, yeah, one of the things that we realized with a boat our size, like not just in that particular situation, but across the entire weekend, with a boat our size, we need to be able to anchor out. That also means we need systems and infrastructure to be able to do it. So having an anchor that will prevent drift or that can actually hit bottom is very important. But we also need to make sure that we have the power on the boat so we are self-sufficient, and that we have enough water and fuel to also make sure that we can anchor out without having to go on shore. And then,
Speaking of power, with losing the engine, we discovered that the two solar panels that the boat came equipped with was not nearly enough to run all the systems that we needed to run. It barely was enough to run our lights overnight.
so we're going to need to expand our power and the ability to recharge our power for future trips.
And definitely expand our battery bank.
Yep, that too. And then also we need to make sure that wherever we are weather-wise, we are able to heat and or cool this boat accordingly. Without our heater working, it did get chilly in this boat. Fortunately, we had enough blankets overnight that it wasn't a problem. And because so for 2 nights so even though on Saturday night we were able to dock, we didn't have access to power. And we talked about that earlier in this video. But on Sunday night, we weren't able to dock. We were out on anchor, and we didn't have the ability to hook up to power. And so both of those nights we were running off grid and didn't have enough batteries to be able to sustain.
So, all in all, while we did enjoy our weekend right up until the end, the only thing actually I'd add is you need to have a decent internet connection on your boat for updated weather information. That has got to be a must. Because if we had been able to receive updated weather information, we would have been able to avoid running into 40 knot winds head on. But beyond that, we got lucky on this trip that we didn't end up in a lot worse shape. But overall, it was a good trip. We did learn a lot, and we're going to take what we learned and move forward.
Yep. It doesn't discourage us. I mean, there were definitely some scary moments with going through those heavy winds on the Monday of Labor Day weekend.
Yeah, well, having a spreader come flying at my head, that was pretty scary.
Yeah, there were definitely scary moments. The winds were higher than what we were ready to be sailing through, and it was the our it it would have been better for us. It would have been nice if the winds had not changed on us that weekend. However, we don't plan on stopping. This is definitely something we're chalking up to experience, and we need to definitely get more experience out on the water. But as winters come, yeah, we'll talk about that later.
Yeah, we'll talk about getting the boat ready for winter in an upcoming video.
So we do want to say that we were lucky, and it's not going to discourage us. We still have to go fix the engine, and we're working on replacing the spreaders as well, and we have some footage on some of that stuff too that we'll be posting at a later date.
So stay tuned for further videos. Like and share if you like what you see. Comment down below if there's something that you'd like to see us cover in future videos. Until then, we'll see you out there.
Bye. We need a remote clicker.